In today's video, we'll be giving you all you need to know to be a better controller player. What's going on, ProGuides family? It's your host, Sergeant Frost, and today we'll be going over all the ins and outs of the controller role. We'll be covering everything from how the role functions and how it should be played, to common mistakes you should avoid, and tips that are specifically important in the likes of ranked. So make sure to stick to the end if you want to learn to play smokes like a top-level player. And also, download Valorant Stat Center, AimLab's new top-tier tracker that gives you access to data and metrics that only pro players had in the past. Not only that, Stat Center even has revolutionary data that tracks your impact called Delta Damage. So if you want to have all the information you'll ever need to master the game, make sure to click the link in the description and download Valorant Stat Center by AimLab today. With that being said, let's jump right into it. Whether it's ranked or pro play, the role of controllers is fairly straightforward. As a controller, you assist the taking of and defending of map control by using your vision blocking abilities. On attack, you help with executes and taking neutral zones, sometimes even holding down the site in a post plant, and on defense, you'll defend sites, take neutral zones, and use your abilities for retakes. The value of controllers is quite apparent. You gain value by your ability to help control parts of the map and deny information. But in a way, you could say that controllers are the glue that holds a team together. Without a controller, pushing any open area of the map can feel near impossible. You can have initiators flash or stun every corner, but unless you have a controller on your team to lock it down, you're not going to be able to hold that space very long. The area you just flashed can get peeked again, and that stun is only going to last a couple of seconds anyways. Simply put, controllers create value by blocking vision, gaining and maintaining map control, and denying information. Without smoke, certain areas of the map are simply uncontestable, and even taking other areas of the map becomes sustainably more difficult. This is why controllers are crucial for any team composition, and why we'll likely never see a meta develop where controllers are not used in a team comp. In Valorant's history, we have seen roles like Sentinels and Duelists fall in and out of fashion, and maybe even eventually we could see a meta where initiators are not as necessary. But controllers will always be there, as without them the game is fundamentally not played the same. As a controller, there are some very important things to nail if you want to optimally play the role. One of the most important things being timing. When you're playing a controller, timing is everything. Get it wrong and your push likely does too. When you smoke early, it serves as an early warning system for your enemies. They can get their abilities ready and their teammates can start rotating. Late, on the other hand, means that your teammates are exposed to more angles than they need to be, and they might die an untraded death because of it. So be careful and keep a close eye on the radar. Ideally, you want your smokes to go up as your Sova drone or other piece of initiator utility is going through the choke point. This allows your duelist players or other entry players to go up behind it and essentially trade the utility as if it was a player. Secondly, it's important that you have your smokes ready when your team wants to go in. On most controllers, you have the ability to use some part of your kit relatively freely. On Astra, you can pre-place and take back your stars, on Omen your smokes recharge, and on Viper you have fuel that also recharges too. But as soon as your team wants to go in, you need to have all of your utility ready and fully charged. Using an Omen smoke early in the round to take some control is usually good, but if you know your team wants to enter a site 15 seconds later, you can't do it. As soon as your team is in position, your smokes need to go up too. And if you're missing something for whatever reason, that needs to be communicated very clearly, since the only thing that's worse than your team having to wait for cooldowns is them running in and dying since they weren't expecting some kind of utility that didn't end up being there. Basically, being a good controller requires careful planning and cooldown management, clear communication, and correct reading of the game state, in order to ensure that that proper utility is there when you need it. And lastly, a hopefully obvious but nonetheless integral part is that you need to be in a position to smoke. Of course, first of all, that implies that you need to be alive when you need to smoke. But also note that all controllers except Astra need to be positioned correctly in order for them to use their utility well. Brimstone and Omen have a somewhat limited smoke range, and Viper especially requires proper positioning in order to consistently use correct walls and smoke lineups. This again comes down to proper planning, knowing beforehand when your team is about to push so that when you're standing in a safe position to use your utility in the correct spots. Even though the role might seem simple, which is to use the right smokes at the right time, there are some major pitfalls that a lot of players fall into. So let's break down a few. One of the most important mistakes controller players tend to make is to have an over-focus on staying alive. Don't get us wrong, staying alive on a controller player is hugely important. I mean, we've certainly stressed the importance of not only being there when you need to be, but also for the role as a whole. But still, you can take it too far. What a lot of controller players end up doing is going so passive that they're essentially just playing super far from the action all the time. They try to avoid gunfights at all costs and focus solely on their decision making. This has its upsides. If you do this, you are probably nailing your smoke timings, which is good. But you also become very reliant on your team doing everything, and you may even get spooked out of taking an easy fight just because you're worried about dying. So don't fall into the trap of playing too passive just to stay alive. You want to be mechanically comfortable enough to take your 1v1s if necessary, and working for space along with your team without relying on them to hit shots. I mean, think about it, as a controller you're often going to be left last alive, so having solid mechanics and confidence is going to go a long way even if you aren't using it to open up the round. Another thing that people tend to do wrong really comes down to the type of smokes you throw. Throwing smokes that just aren't so good, or even to help the enemy in some instances. Firstly, we'd like to quickly differentiate aggressive and defensive smokes. The key difference lies in this. When you don't want people to run through an area, you use a defensive smoke. These are flush with entrances, so that it forces people going through to expose themselves to all angles at once. When you attack B of Bayern, for example, you want to throw both a defensive smoke on CT as well as elbow, so that defenders running through them expose themselves to a lot of angles at once. Similarly, when defending, you also almost always want to use defensive smokes on choke points. Think of Garden on B bind again. Your smoke should be flush with the entrance so that if attackers walk through, they instantly expose themselves to all of the site. The left hand of Cubby as well, everywhere. You can also throw aggressive smokes. These are smokes that are not flush with the entrance and are purposefully placed ahead of the choke so that it allows you to isolate angles and take peeks. To give you an example, maybe you want to push B again. You place a smoke ahead of the garden smoke so that it allows you to clear Cubby, then left side of sight and so on, all one by one. Aggressive smokes aren't used super often, but it's important to realize that they give the player pushing through an advantage. So please make sure you don't accidentally throw one for your enemies, as a lot less experienced controllers do. Another type of bad smoke that gets thrown an awful lot are smokes that are meant to synergize but actually work against each other. Think smoking both mid and cat on ascent. Normally, you'd smoke mid to take A short, or smoke short to take mid. But by smoking both, well, you kinda just waste time and resources.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Of course, in an ideal scenario, a perfect world, all would go as planned. Your duelists and initiators are working together clearly and it's relatively easy to plan your hit, but in reality, especially in a ranked setting, a number of things can go wrong. You can get bullied into canceling an execute by an abundance of enemy utility or even ultimates. Your Jet can decide that even though your Sova used a good drone and all the smokes are there, that he actually doesn't want to go in. And maybe you even just made a mistake of using your smokes way too early, putting your smokes out of stock, without a clear play to go for. If this happens, there's more or less two plays you can go for. You can hit a site anyway, preferably one that has less defenders or requires less utility, or you can go and find some duels around the map and try to play the mid round. By splitting up and looking for duels, you force your enemy to spread their defense thin as well, meaning that even a single kill can give you a massive amount of map control and enable more opportunities around the map. In order for this to work though, you have to be comfortable reading the map and taking 1v1 duels. This is a key reason for why controller players can't be slacking when it comes to practicing their aim. To add on to that, in ranked, coordination is not perfect, nor is communication. So it's not going to be uncommon that your team doesn't work well together. This might not be the best if you're a controller player, but there's certainly ways to work around it. In these types of situations, it's going to be really important for you to constantly be aware of what's happening on the map and proactively help your teammates as they're taking space. If you're on attack side Haven and notice your Jet walking around mid, you can say something like, "Hey Jet, want me to smoke your garage?" It's possible that the answer is still no, but at the very least you're able to create an impact. What really helps in these types of scenarios as well is being very comfortable with your own utility, so that you can develop an arsenal of ratty plays opponents find hard to counter or just aren't used to. If you're a Viper player and you're able to do effective aggressive lurks like commonly seen on Bind short or Icebox mid, you can have a lot of success even without much help from your team. But even on the other controllers, it's very possible to create those types of plays. Maybe you use an aggressive smoke to isolate angles and take an unexpected fight. Or you could even use other abilities in your kit like Astra Sucks, Brim's Stim Beacon, or even Omen's Teleport in order to set up plays that your enemies might not expect or know how to play against. All in all, controllers are easily the most important and indispensable role in the game, and you as a controller player should definitely value yourself. But be wary, there's a lot of responsibility resting on your shoulders and it's easy to make small but round losing mistakes if you don't take your role seriously. That's gonna wrap it up though, so we hope you learned something. And make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Don't forget to ring the notification bell for more quality videos just like this one. This has been your host Sergeant Frost, and I'll see you all in the next one.